Hello there, everyone. I am Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach. I'm the founder of the Dream Business Mastermind, author of these 6 awesome books that can help you grow your dream business. I'm the creator of No Hassle Newsletters, which is an extraordinary done for you newsletter program used by over 1,200 small business owners in 9 countries. But most importantly, today, I am the host of Dream Business Radio. Now in its 10th year, this is episode 537. So another fantastic live edition of Dream Business Radio with my special guest, Michael Davis. Michael, how you doing today from Cincinnati?
I'm doing very well, Jim. Thank you for having me on, and love those accomplishments you've got.
Well, it's not my first, I'm not 21 anymore, as the color on my face indicates. Anyway, hey, folks, this episode of Dream Business Radio is brought to you by the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program. If you're an entrepreneur, small business owner who's tired of slow to no growth in your business, I am talking fast because this is going to be a great show. Or if you're feeling overwhelmed, unfocused, but especially if you're interested in creating multiple streams of revenue in your business, then check out the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program led by me, Captain Jim Palmer. That is at dreambizcoaching.com, dreambizcoaching.com. Okay, real quick before I jump in and introduce Mike, I want to say a quick thank you to literally a couple hundred people that reached out with condolences, and got some private emails from a lot of people on my team about the passing of my father-in-law. It's been a difficult week, but we're back at work today. I'm very happy to do that. So thank you. All right, let me tell you a little bit about Michael, and we'll dive right into this very important topic. One of my favorites, believe it or not, now it is. Michael Davis helps professionals attract more clients, create efficient teams, and increase their influence with improved speaking skills. His passion for his work was born when he was threatened with a job loss because of his poor speaking skills. I almost didn't graduate high school because I had bad speaking skills. With the help of thought leaders and industry experts, he discovered how to become an impactful speaker, trainer, and coach. Michael has helped speakers on 5 continents, and he has written 7 storytelling books. He's a speaker, trainer, and the founder of Speaking CPR. He lives in Ohio with his partner, Linda, and the overlords of their house, Sky and Riley, the super chihuahuas. Oh boy. Michael, welcome to Dream Business Radio, my friend.
Thank you, Jim. It occurred to me, I know why you're speaking so quickly.
Why is that?
Because you don't want people playing this video at 2x later on.
yeah, that'll sound like Mickey Mouse. I talk fast anyway. I just want to cram as much in. So, Michael, everyone knows the old, the familiar line from that old Seinfeld episode. Given the chance, most people would rather be in the casket or coffin than delivering the eulogy. That's the level of fear that most people have about public speaking. So did you hate public speaking, or were you just bad at it and you got the threatening your job, or what led you into this?
Well, I'll first start with a counter to the Seinfeld quote. I mean, he did say that. I discovered a few years ago that it's not public speaking that we're afraid of.
Okay.
What we're really afraid of is public humiliation.
Oh, true.
And another big fear that we have is walking into a room full of strangers. So what is public speaking? It is the threat of public humiliation in front of a huge group of strangers.
That's exactly right.
Those are the root causes. But for my own situation, it all started on a desk in first grade. I was punished for breaking a class rule one day. And the punishment was that I had to stand on top of my desk during nap time.
That's not safe.
Well, it wasn't safe physically, but it was even less safe emotionally, because at some point, all of my classmates decided we're going to taunt him. And I mean, I was getting the,
oh, yeah,
you're stupid, all of that. And that went on for 35 minutes.
Mm.
And when I stepped down, my teacher said, I hope you've learned your lesson. And I had. I thought, never standing in front of people again. That was awful. And for the next 25 years, I never voluntarily stood in front of a group until, ironically, I become a certified financial planner, and I'm told you're going to have to present workshops to attract new clients.
The lunches.
The lunches, the dinners, and it didn't take long for me to start getting feedback that was negative. And one day my boss sat me down in his office and said, went through a bunch of evaluations, none of them positive. And he said, I quote, "You're a lousy speaker. Your stories suck. Fix this in the next 90 days or else we got to let you go."
Wow. What did you do?
I looked for help, I immediately started calling friends, and they suggested a couple of public speaking organizations, which is where I went. I mean, at this
Mm-hmm.
point, I'd forgotten the incident from first grade. I mean, it was buried
Right.
in my subconscious. I just knew I was afraid and I wasn't effective. So I discovered along the way, number one, everybody's had a bad experience. Number two, public speaking is a skill that can be developed. It's learnable. Who knew? And it's also human nature to be afraid of standing in front of other folks. So
Right.
with that knowledge, I started diving into it, and I kept going back and eventually learned how to manage nerves. You don't get rid of them. Second, that I do have something valuable to say. And by picking up formats and strategies on how to effectively create a memorable message and deliver it authentically, took 2 decades, but eventually I discovered how to become more confident and feel like, yes, I've got something valuable to say. And then, I don't know, about 12 years ago, I noticed people were asking me for help.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I decided I should get into the coaching aspect of this. So I started this company, very small. It was a weekend project. And
So
then,
while you were still employed, you started kind of like a side gig,
yeah,
side
exactly.
hustle.
It was a
Okay.
side gig. And I just did it as a hobby, but I had more and more people coming to me, and eventually they started paying. Eventually they started paying some pretty nice amounts.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this feels like what I'm supposed to be doing. Financial planning is fun. I like it, but I didn't have a passion for it.
Right.
This, I felt like there are people, I get the fear, the humiliation, the regret of missed opportunities because I was afraid to share my voice and my ideas. And I thought I can help other people with that. And that's what I want to do. So here I am.
Yeah, I could see where being a financial planner, because that's not my forte. Luckily, we work with a pretty good company. But being a financial planner can change lives. But it's kind of like one of those things you have to take care of. Being a speaker and speaking eloquently and having an impact like that could really change lives. Is that kind of the difference? What you're seeing there?
Yeah. So when I first started this and I was getting hired, Jim, I thought I had this idea that I could help 100 people a year with
Mm,
financial planning. What if I could help 100 advisors improve their communication skills so they
sure.
could help 100? Now I'm scaling impact. And that's what it's about, making sure that people are getting the best messages out there and impacting as many people as possible. It's impossible to gauge how many people you can help with what I do today. And I've accepted the fact long ago, and I tell my clients this: you're never going to know how many people you truly touch.
Yeah. Um, just curious so how long did you do it as a part-time gig? And when did you have to say, okay, I'm going to leave my full-time job and really, make speaking CPR my full-time business?
7 years. It
Oh
was
my goodness.
originally a 3-year plan.
Okay.
I like to extend things. But back in 2018, I built enough momentum and I thought, okay, I just turned 55. Now you've got a decision to make. You're not young anymore. As you mentioned yourself, I'm not 21. I've got to
Yep.
make a choice. I can't live in two worlds. So I just decided to go for broke and don't regret it one bit.
Did you have any entrepreneurs? I always ask this: parents, grandparents. Does anybody kind of show you that there is an alternative to W-2 paycheck and paid vacation?
Yes, parents owned a dry cleaner for 7 years. And when I
Okay.
was in my late teens, I worked in it and I saw the benefits and the downside of owning a business. But it was a great education for me at a young age to just watch what they had to do. And being independent people themselves and teaching me to be independent, it's like I can't work for someone else very well.
Yeah. I mean, God willing, I'm still going to do this for a few more years, but I could never work for somebody again. I mean, I did for many years, but I'm like, God, there's just no way. So, what is the greatest skill that you teach at speaking CPR? Is it how to be a speaker, how to overcome nerves, or is it the art of storytelling, or is it all the above?
It's a really good question. Yeah, it is all the above, but I think the most important skill that we teach now is teaching people to trust that they have something valuable to say.
Mm,
You and I, and if you're watching this live or recorded, you are subject to a concept called the curse of knowledge. Now, curse of knowledge has a couple of implications. Number one, as speakers, we have to be careful that we don't know our topic so well that we assume our audience does. So we start using jargon, terminology.
Right.
That's one version of curse of knowledge. The other is, I know my topic so well, I don't see anything special about my experience and my knowledge.
You start undervaluing it because it seems commonplace to you.
Yes, you forget that 99.9% of the world, and that's research. Not really, but it's 99.9% of the world does not know your topic like you do. You have so much value and you don't see it because you live it every day. And I learned that from, of all people, my mother. My mother was born in German-occupied France during World War II. And one day this is 20 years ago, she was telling me all these experiences my grandparents had with her and her older sister, just little girls, and they were part of the French resistance.
Mm-hmm.
So at any time, the Gestapo could have knocked on their door and cut to the chase. They would have shot them on sight if they knew what they were doing.
Yep.
And every day was a struggle to find food. And every night you had to worry about, are we going to have bombs dropped on us? This was day after day after day for 3.5 years. So when my mom gets done telling me this story, Jim, I'm like, oh my God, I did not know this. Mom, how did Grandma and Grandpa do that? How did you get through that ordeal? She looked at me for the longest time and she said, well, honey, that's just what we did.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me at the time, Jim, but she was telling me, well,
she was telling you a powerful story.
Yeah, she was telling me, I don't see any value in this. I just lived it. And that's when it occurred to me, every person has that same experience. You had some extraordinary journeys out on the ocean. And you shared some with me, but I'm sure there are others that you're like, well, we just did it. We're out on the water.
Sinking was not an option. We had to overcome.
That's right. You and your wife have those kind of stories that you tend to discount because, well, we did it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things sort of come in vogue, so to speak. And storytelling is one of those things that seems to be kind of hip right now. Saying hip probably makes me sound old, but storytelling is important. I mean, you know, as a business coach, I'm teaching people not only to respect and appreciate the true value they bring from a pricing perspective, but if you do get up and speak before a group, don't get up there and say, hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming. What a beautiful auditorium, blah, blah, blah. You go in with a story, correct? I mean, is that what you teach? Launch right into it because you have about 30 seconds at the most to captivate them.
Yes, you bring up a good point, and I think it's hip to say hip still.
Okay, good. We're close in age, so we'll just be two unhippers.
Now, here's the thing about storytelling, and it has inspired the title of my new book. Actually, my old boss inspired the title of my new book, which is Your Stories Suck. Here's what I'm seeing is that people are hearing, get out there and tell your story. It is a hot topic.
Right.
Well, storytelling is not a hot topic in the sense that we've been telling it since before we had written language. It's how our ancestors passed on their lessons, their morals, their ethics, their history. So it's part of who we are as human beings. Right? People know that. Here's the challenge I'm seeing. People are getting up and they're just sharing narratives that are bullet pointed reports, and they sound like a reporter standing on a street corner reporting for the news.
Right.
What my big kick right now is I have a keynote called Stop Telling Stories, Start Creating Experiences.
Okay.
Audiences today more than ever want to be entertained. And in that entertainment, we have to bury messages and valuable insights. So that means you don't report, I did this and I did that. And that. No, we take us into those scenes. In storytelling, there are two foundational elements. One is getting emotional, meaning you've got to inject emotion into it and trigger that emotion in your listeners. And there are 6 common emotions all human beings share: happiness, anger, sadness, surprise, disgust, and fear. So if you can insert at least one of them, and don't artificially put it in there just to manipulate people's emotions, it will come out of an interaction within stories. So get emotional. And the second concept is what we call vaccinate your speech.
Okay.
Not that vaccination that half the world is fighting over. Now, this is one we can all agree on. Vaccinate is spelled VAKS, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and smell. Now, if you're a medical person, I know the correct word for smell is olfactory, but vaccinate does not work for my metaphor. So I say smell. And I also know there's taste involved.
Okay.
But when we can create a scene that involves those elements, the sensory elements, all of a sudden, your story starts to become that story of your listeners. They start tapping into their experiences. And all of a sudden, it's a shared experience, and it's not just a story anymore. And when you can bury a lesson in there that they can take away, they're going to remember you, and they're going to remember the message forever.
So when you're working with clients, I mean, there's everything from TED Talks, which I think are about 10 minutes generally. There's a half hour, 1 hour keynote, sometimes, 90 minutes. I think anything longer than that, you got to put a break in there. But do you teach people how to storytell all the way down into like 10 minutes and all the way up to like, an hour or so, like a keynote?
Well, we have two elements. We have a high impact speaking framework and a high impact storytelling framework. Very different frameworks, because stories, I don't like to put a limit on stories, because as a great storytelling coach out there says, the story is as long as it needs to be and no longer.
Well, that's just like copywriting, right? Are you for short copy or long copy? Your copy needs to be as long as it needs to be and no longer.
Yes. So for stories, I'll say general rule of thumb, 3 to 5 minutes is about all you need for a good story to tell a good lesson. A keynote, you mentioned TED. I mean, I'm seeing them as short as 5 to 7 minutes now. They go as long as 18, but in there, that's a TED Talk. Keynotes are now they're shortening them to 30 minutes in some cases. 30 to 60 to 90 is that range. We teach a modular concept of speech creation, meaning you can create a 90-minute talk with different supporting points. And if at the last minute they say to you, Jim, sorry, CEO went over time, we've got to cut your 90 down to 30. Can you do it? No problem. I'm just going to pull these 3 or 4 points out that I was going to make, save those for a future speech, and you can still have impact.
So there is a framework, right?
Yes.
If you have 30 minutes to give a presentation in front of a group, maybe this is a question you can't answer, but is there a certain number of stories within a 30-minute presentation? Because you do have to deliver content, right?
You do.
I mean, if you're a financial guy, you got to talk about 401ks and this, that, and the other thing. Stories are nice, but they help support. Like, what's the framework in an average 30-minute presentation, if that's a legit
for 30
question?
minutes, there's a rule we use, and it is a legitimate question. We use a rule called the 10-to-1 rule. For every 10 minutes of speaking time, you should have one supporting point for your main point.
For every 10 minutes, you should have at least one supporting point for the main point. Is the main point the reason they were there to listen to you? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, I don't want to nitpick, but it's not at least 1 point, no more than 1 point for every 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Because that enables you to go deeper. For example, when I'm talking about storytelling, I mentioned get emotional and vaccinate your story. Well, if I've got a 30-minute talk, I will use just those two and go deep into those, because we have to remember we have an opening and a conclusion to the speech.
Right.
A challenge that almost every person we've worked with has is that they tend to overstuff information into their presentations. I call that the lunch buffet effect.
Yeah. You got to try everything.
Exactly. What happens when you try everything? An hour later, you're sitting in your seat looking for a cot.
That's right.
I don't even want to go to my car. I just want a nap. And if people were ask you later in the day, what'd you have for lunch? I don't remember. It was stuffing. It was good, but I don't remember. I mention that because we do have that same effect on our audiences. We stuff that we have to try everything, because I think there are 2 reasons that we do this as speakers, by the way. Number one, we love our topic so much, we're going to inundate you with everything, but more often than not, it's insecurity.
And I think a lot of speakers, at least the ones I've seen, so it's my own brilliant deduction. You may have a different opinion, but they just want to impress so much. They're going to cram all this knowledge in. And it's like drinking from a fire hose is an expression you hear.
That's a terrific observation. That's it. It's a sense of insecurity. I've got to prove to you that I belong up here. And what people are looking for is the exact opposite. They're already inundated with information. They don't need, I was gonna say, they don't need more information. This little device right here will give me more information than you can ever give me in a presentation.
That's right. So what's the biggest misconception about storytelling? I mean, beginning, middle, end, or like, because we're talking about storytelling in the framework of a presentation, not just how do you tell a great story, right? So how do you build that story into a presentation? Because most of the people watching this are small business owners who probably get up and speak to groups about X, Y, and Z. And if they want to interject a story or two in their presentation, what's the framework for that?
Well, let me address the first question. It's a two-part question you just asked. Number one, what's the biggest misconception? I haven't climbed Mount Everest. I haven't discovered Titanic at the bottom of the ocean. Who would want to listen to me? All right. I've never had anybody raise their hand in years of asking this question in a workshop. Raise your hand if you've climbed to the top of Everest, won a gold medal. I did meet the gentleman who, Dr. Ballard, who discovered Titanic, so I can't ask that one. But
oh, wow.
Nobody's ever raised their hand. So the point of that is, if most people haven't done it, how can they relate to the speaker who has? What we can relate to is those day-to-day frustrations, those challenges that everybody in your audience is facing. Talk about those. But that goes back to the curse of knowledge. Well, who cares? I had a business problem. I had to overcome an employee leaving unexpectedly, which, whatever the problem is, we can relate to those. So don't discount those frustrations, those failures, those flaws that you've had, because those are relatable.
So you said you have a book on how to do great storytelling. Is that correct? I should have known that. Sorry, but I think you mentioned you have
my first book was the book on storytelling.
Okay.
And then the second one that's coming out later this year, Your Stories Suck, which just my boss did me such a favor helping me create the title of a book 30 years ago when he said that.
It's funny how that works.
Couldn't have known. But let's go back to your question about how do you structure your story?
Yeah.
If you're a business owner, there are two effective types of stories. One is the origin story. I gave you a shortened version of one to tell you why I do what I do. Is because I was humiliated in first grade, and I understand the frustration, the fear, and the regret. That's an origin type story.
Okay.
The second is the successful client story. Now, this is where you introduce a client, and I get, for privacy reasons, just give the client a different name. Nobody's going to fact check you.
Right.
Talk about a client who was having a problem and they could not solve it on their own. Person met you. You introduced a new concept, a product, a service, or an idea. They implemented it. Maybe after some initial difficulties, they started to have some success until they reached the point in the story where they overcome the original problem.
Okay.
Now they're living a new and better life. That kind of story will appeal when you're out speaking at a chamber or a Rotary group. And when there are people sitting in the audience who can relate to the client in the story, they'll want to talk to you.
That's right. They'll come up to you.
Yeah. I love to call it the when Harry met Sally moment. I'll have what she's having.
Yeah.
Your people in the audience are having these problems and they want to solve them. I'll have what your client had.
Time is going way too fast because I love this topic and I think a lot of people can use some help. So we might go 2 or 3 minutes long if that's okay. You don't have a hard stop, do you? Or
no,
do
I'm
you?
fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Budgeted time.
I was looking at your website, which is pretty cool. SpeakingCPR.com, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yep. And one of your blog posts, I'm just have to ask this. It's titled, "When is it okay to use words like and ah?" I was under the impression that's not a good thing.
It's okay to use them. I think it's okay in any situation. What you don't want to do is use them all the time, obviously. But ever so often, if you throw in an or an it's not hurting your presentation because that's a conversational gap filler that we all use.
Okay.
Each of us has done it in this interview. I'm sure. I don't remember when. It's part of human conversation.
Yeah.
what you want to do is limit their use.
Okay.
When you've got when you're listening to a speaker who every 10, 15 seconds is saying, that's annoying. But once in a great while, don't beat yourself up on it. We're not looking for perfection from a speaker. We're looking for connection. So an occasional or not a big deal.
Not a big deal. Another blog post, which made me think of my great friend, Melanie Benson, just a terrific mindset coach. I've had her speak at all my events. And after a while, she'd maybe go 10, 15 minutes and she goes, so let me just pause for a minute. I want to check in with you. Right. And so one of your blog posts is titled, when should you check in to keep your audience from checking out? Is that what you mean, what Melanie did, or was there something slightly different?
Yeah, very similar to what Melanie's doing in a story. Now, I gave you the short version of my story, what happened in first grade. I'll give you an example of how I do this is I'll say, when I was 6 years old, I loved to entertain people. Loved to make people laugh. I was a bit of a ham. So that's why one day during indoor recess in first grade, I had this thought. I'm so bored. I'm going to get up on my desk and have fun. Imagine you're standing in a room full of first graders. They're stuck inside. What does that look like to you?
That's the checking in, right?
What does it sound like? Yes, it's checking in, and it's also pulling you right into my story because I want you in that room with us.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it's a type of check-in. Another type is I might be talking about when I have my meeting in my boss's office. I'm sitting in my boss's office. I'm ready for what I'm expecting to be our weekly Friday review. Have you ever gone into a meeting expected to go one direction and it went completely the other? That's an audience check-in.
Yeah. I mean, the word imagine, as somebody who studied copywriting for a long time, imagine is just a trigger word because it just, okay, now I'm going to imagine. What should I imagine? Then you tell them, right? Like you
Exactly.
did. And that's how you draw them in. This is such fascinating. I'm not a big fan of, so I'm going to break my own rule. Hey, what's the one thing? But what would be one thing, only because we're limited on time, that somebody who's listening, what could they do to boost their storytelling in order to keep the listener interested? Because if they're not interested, your story could be great or it could suck, whatever. But you have to keep them interested to teach. So what one thing they could do to boost your story and keep the listener interested?
To help create more of an experience, you can do these check-ins we talked about, but what dialogue is critical. When you've got conversation between characters, don't say, well, I was on a podcast with Jim and he asked me a bunch of these questions and one in particular really piqued my interest and I was happy to answer. No, I could say I was on a podcast with Jim and he asked me, and then, hey, what's the most important part of storytelling? And I gave him this answer. See, you want the dialogue between characters, but what's even more powerful is internal dialogue. When I tell the desk story, I could say, well, I was humiliated and I felt terrible, or I could take you into my mind when I was standing on that desk. My friends are looking at me, and all I can think is, I just want to get down. I just want to get down. I won't be bad again. Let me get down. Right now you're in my head and you can relate to being 6 years old, wanting to get away from a situation. People start to feel the story more than just hear about it. They're active participants.
So, dare I call it a masterclass because it's just a half-hour interview, but man, there's some seriously good tips here. Let me squeeze one more question in because while I have you. So there's storytelling, and storytelling can be part of an overall presentation, but let's talk about the presentation itself, like a half-hour presentation. I think I know the answer, but I'm open to learn. What's the most important part of that 30-minute presentation?
Having a foundational concept, a sentence that's less than 10 words that people will remember long after they hear you speak. So I'm working on a keynote. The keynote is stop telling stories, start creating experiences. Hopefully 6 months after people hear that, they'll be talking to a friend. Hey, remember that guy we heard? He talked about experiences, right? That's what I want them to remember. Don't tell a story, create an experience. So having a short foundational concept. that not only is memorable to the main message, but it also serves as a filter for what should go into your speech. If your sub point doesn't support the main idea, it can't go in, no matter how good it is.
Yeah.
The opening story needs to set up that point, and the conclusion needs to tie back to the point.
So, yeah. So what you said, which is not what I thought you would say, is memorable, because what's interesting is, just being a marketer, I'm always fascinated, in years past, actually, of commercials, Super Bowl commercials, how much people spend. And what commercial did you like? Well, this one there. And what was it about? I don't know. Right. So why would you spend $1 million or a second or whatever it is? And it's like, I don't know what those goats were doing on the side of a roller coaster, and you have no idea what company it was. Right. So therefore it was only memorable. I guess you could say it was memorable, but not for the right reason. Right.
Correct. And I see this with speakers a lot. The best speakers do not worry about whether the audience remembers them. They're concerned, will the speaker remember the message and actually use it?
Not what you said, but how did you make them feel, right?
Exactly. And if it's all about, I want people to remember me, and I just love to get up and speak, and that does not make you a good presenter.
Right.
It doesn't, because that's not why people are there. You are just a conduit to a message. And one of the most important lessons I had to learn, Jim, and I've taught my clients, is you've got to have an ego to think you have something important to say in front of an audience. However, that ego needs to be tempered by the reality, the harsh reality, that if you weren't up there speaking, they'd find somebody else.
That's right.
So
you're not that unique.
It's about what you provide the audience, and that shouldn't be you. It should be that message.
Fascinating half hour, which I can always tell because time goes by so quickly, because that means I'm engaged. So, Michael, thank you so much. It's really great information.
Thank you.
I gave your website, but if there's something else, so you have one book now, and when's the next one? Your presentation sucks, or what was it?
Your story sucks.
Your story sucks.
It'll probably be out in the spring, late spring. And there's a resource we have.
Okay.
You're welcome to sign up for. It's called 52 Storytelling Insights. It's 52storyinsights.com. That's a weekly 5-minute audio that comes right to your email inbox. It's an audio lesson. And the idea behind it is to build one skill on top of another over 52 weeks. When I did this, I tripled my productivity when I was doing workshops and seminars to attract new clients.
Wow. And that the URL for that?
52storyinsights.com.
Wow. Very cool. Michael, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your time today.
I appreciate it, Jim, and I hope your audience was served well today.
I'm sure they're going to love it. Hey, folks, that wraps up this very special interview with my guest, Michael Davis from Speaking CPR. I should have asked what CPR stands for. All right, Michael, let me rewind before I close out here. What does CPR stand for?
It's the CPR that we use to restart people's hearts. We love to say that we are injecting or providing new life to stories and speeches that are on life support.
That right there. See, that's what they're going to remember right there. I'm glad I asked that. All right. Hey, folks, take two. That wraps up this very special interview with my guest, Michael Davis. I highly recommend you connect with him, follow him, and learn from him, and go to 52 Storytelling Insights. Give it one more time. Sorry.
52storyinsights.com.
52storyinsights.com. I'm a little lack of sleep. People will forgive me for this one. Anyway, hey, folks, you can connect with me at getjimpalmer.com. If you're interested in joining me and about 27 other smart entrepreneurs right now in the Dream Business Mastermind, go to dreambizcoaching.com. Remember, as part of my legacy building program, I've made all 6 of my books free in the digital format. So they're free Kindle version at Amazon, Nook Books at Barnes & Noble, and you can also get them in the iBook store, totally free. But that's it. Until this time next week, another fantastic interview. I am Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach, and you take good care.